Chason, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm in my apartment and toasty enough right now. So,
Staying
it's a
warm.
happy place to
Good,
be.
good. So I
Yeah.
think we met initially through Lucia Love, right? You
Oh
had
yeah.
we had a show at
Yeah.
our spot. We were roommates for a minute, and we were studio mates. And you had a
Oh,
piece
okay.
in a
Yeah.
group show that she put on.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Yeah. Because I know we have other connections as well too, but I guess that was the first time we met
And
was
then we recently met again via Matt Serletti at Karma.
yes. Exactly. Yeah. I was trying to remember as well too because I listened to Lucia's episode with you. Yeah, a little while back, and I knew that there was that connection, but then I was like, there's other connections as well too. I forget what they are. If we're did you assisted for some artists as well too in the past?
I did. I assisted for Paul Lee for a minute. Do you know
Oh,
Paul?
okay.
Shows at Karma.
Um,
I also occasionally made panels for Susan Fraycon.
okay.
Do you know
Interesting.
Susan?
No.
You know her
Oh, I
work?
know the
She,
work. Yeah,
yeah,
but don't know her.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of the art world, though, is that there's so many different art worlds, and there's so many different overlaps, and then there's so many different circles and people and groups, and you can know somebody through all these multiple avenues, and it
Yeah.
really is such a rich, especially in New York, it's such a rich place.
Oh, completely. I mean, that's it's hard for me to keep track of all the connections at this point over the years and where I've met a person and then they come back into your life in another way and it's it it's big enough where it remains very interesting and exciting, but also not too big where you keep seeing the same people around and um, it doesn't feel like a small village, but at least there's some familiar faces when you're out there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So when did you move to New York?
2001, I moved to New York. I
For
transferred
undergrad?
from for undergrad. I was at San Francisco State University for film, and then transferred with the intention of going into NYU for film school.
You switched to painting while at NYU.
Yeah, well, I didn't have I was drawing and painting, so I only had the portfolio to get into the art school. But I thought that I could get into the art school and then I could transfer the next semester over to the film department.
Ah, I
Um,
see. Yeah.
yeah, but once I got to the art school, I knew immediately that I had found my people. I mean, you doing with this podcast is like it's great. I mean, that's part of my favorite thing of being an artist is studio visits and just being able to have conversations with semi-random people that you come across.
It's so much about connection and so much about sharing this experience, whatever it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the real creative, if there was nobody around to share it with and to connect with, it would be crazy, I think.
right.
You know,
It would totally be crazy making.
it wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of hermit like myself, so I could go through about maybe like I mean, honestly, probably like 3 years, but then I would need someone to chat with
Yeah,
again
yeah,
at
yeah.
some point.
Well,
And
you
then
kind
the
of,
wild thing for me as well too is just like, you with all the people that I come across in this world, it's hard to find a rhythm with them, which is fine. That's kind of the interesting part of a lot of conversations because it's just, to get onto the other person's rhythm. But when it's an artist and it can just be a person that I meet at an opening and we go, hey, let's do visits with each other. And you can fall into a rhythm with that person so immediately just talking about, the studio practice or thinking about art. And that's always like such a beautiful thing because it makes me when I'm in the studio alone know that I'm still having this conversation with many other people, even though we might not be, physically having that conversation all the time. But there are many people out there on my wavelength working on whatever this mysterious project we're all working on is.
yeah, it's important to have that perspective on your work because you can never really see it clear or just have multiple perspectives.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I find that I end up just lying to myself about anytime that I try to speak directly to my work, I when I come back to it, I'm like, oh, I was totally full of shit trying to explain my project at the moment. I can just see myself fronting and my ego getting in the way and or trying to sound smart or speak to the moment that we happen to be in, but it really does not get to what I'm doing. So and that's a hard position to be in. And knowing, I mean, having other people out there to talk with and getting their perspective on it is really, what illuminates all of that.
That's
Yeah,
why we're here.
completely.
What were some of the most impactful studio visits you've had?
Um, let's. I mean, it's funny thinking. I went to NYU for undergrad and started in 2001, and then went back to NYU for grad school in 2010. And if I really am thinking about it, like during those years, the influence of all my professors, um, I can see in my work pretty directly. But my memory works in a way where I don't remember specific conversations. There's only a few studio visits where I can kind of retain the feeling of that visit. So I can feel their influence in a more abstract way. But it's only a few studio visits that were probably kind of harsh where I'm can remember them directly. Unfortunately, I don't remember the good ones where someone is praising me.
Of course, I think that's the way it always works, right? You would remember the negative ones. I think there's a tendency for negative bias, and that's not always bad. I think that can be very a useful learning experience where somebody says something like, I don't know, I don't really, I'm not buying this, especially in grad school where it can be
Yeah,
you're encouraged to like that environment is kind of created where it's like critical in a way that you just don't have out in the real world.
yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, and even in I don't know what your experience was, but there were some harsh crits in grad school, but people kind of you invite that energy onto yourself. And I am I'm very polite and I'm very nice for the most part, and I am people pleasing as well too. So I don't end up getting a lot of harsh criticism because people are just like, what, I can't do that to this guy.
You're
Sort of
well liked.
sort of, yeah. Or I just, yeah, but I almost do it as like a defense mechanism. I'm just
Yeah.
like, let's go into this in a polite way, because if I'm polite, then this person is not going to be rude with me. So really, when I think back to the bad studio visits I have had, it's because in some way I was kind of unintentionally rude to that person. So like one I remember is, do you know the writer Bob Nickus?
Sounds familiar. Is he an art critic?
He's an art critic, yeah, and he curates shows as well too. But he was teaching at NYU at the time, and I was in one of his classes, and I was setting up my first year MFA show, and it overlapped with his class, which was at nighttime, and I only had that window. But I went into his class and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to miss your class because I have to do this thing," which is kind of rude to miss his class. And though when his class was getting out, I was like, hey, come give me a quick crit of what I just set up here. And he was kind of like, oh, like you missed my class and then you asked me to take my time out to do this thing. So he let it rip on me. But in a not in a mean spirited way, but just like described what I was doing in a way that illustrated to me like, oh, I'm putting on a circus show in the way that I don't want to be putting on a circus show with my work. And you know, it stuck with me, that one.
Mhm.
But I'd kind of invited that like energy from him. I feel like, um, but it's hard even now to get those more uh, critical takes on your work. I don't know if you've found that to be true for yourself.
Some years ago, a friend of mine came to the studio and said, "Oh, I was doing these sort of like landscape paintings that were they were like digital collages kind of," and he was like,
Yeah.
"These look like screensavers." And I was just like, "What?" like, like what? I was like really shocked that
Yeah.
but it was I don't know if it was useful or not, but and I think he was trying to sort of do this like old school New York, like I'm an artist and I tell it like it is sort of thing. Now you'd be hard pressed to find somebody to say anything remotely negative. I think it's good and bad, like I think for the most part it's good. I think just supporting somebody and giving good energy and supporting the creative
Yeah.
process, whatever that looks like. I mean, it's a balance, right? You want honesty, you also want to be you want encouragement. I suppose also the fact that somebody's interested enough to come to your studio, there's a good chance that they already kind of like your work and like you. So
Oh, totally. I mean, when I was teaching for about 10 years as well, and it was just intro to painting classes, and all the students are so nice. But I, would in the crits, I would be like, okay, constructive criticism. Like none of us are going to get better unless we give sort of criticism here. And it would be very hard to get out of the students. And
they didn't want to say anything mean or negative or what the way they perceived as mean or negative, even if it was constructive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it would happen eventually, but it did take a little bit of coaxing. Um, but with that studio visit, I feel like I was on when I was in grad school, I was on this cusp, where, it was that kind of old school mentality where it's like, you come into grad school, we break you down. And once we tear you down to the ground, then we build you up the next year, sort of thing. Um, and that was still the mentality of some people, never in a mean way or anything, but just like that's how make people better artists. And then by the time I was leaving grad school, it had turned into a more kind of kumbaya situation where it was like it's like a support group for everyone.
I had the same experience, which I think
Yeah.
in grad school you kind of have to have that.
Yeah.
You got to get cut down for like working out or something. Like you're breaking down that muscle. It's tearing. It's literally tearing on a molecular level, and then it builds up stronger. That was the sort of sense impression I got from grad school in a good way.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how and I know that's not how it is for everyone, and not every student is gonna, become a better artist under that approach. But I'm very much with you on that approach. Like I actually, I know I just got finished saying that I didn't receive a lot of harsh criticism, but I love it when I do. Like it nothing makes me laugh or smile more than someone kind of ripping me apart. Um, and I think it's because I do believe that kind of tearing down is the thing. As hard as it's going to be after that, it's going to stick with me, and I'm going to be thinking about it. But that's where the growth is going to come from as
I
well,
got so
too.
much benefit from that. The first critique I got that really did that was I went to Indiana University for undergrad, and it was a very, very
Mm,
specific, a very particular way of style of painting they taught. And I
yeah.
carried that with me, and I didn't realize I was doing it. And I had a
Mm,
teacher call me out and say, you're doing this like Indiana style thing. It's not bad. It's just like Fairfield Porter meets Ewan
mm,
Uglow, and very, very, they called it
hmm.
painting from the motif, which means painting from life, very perceptual. And I learned so much
Okay.
about color and how to see paint and how to, I learned so much about painting that
Yeah.
way. But then I got into grad school and I was still doing it. I had one professor be like, you got to knock this off. And I was this Indiana thing, and I was like, what? I am? What? I just thought that's normal. That was so critical. That was so important. And people in the world, nobody's going to tell you that. But
Yeah.
it's a really special time where if you're lucky enough to have teachers that will tell you, or people, people around you that'll tell you what your tendencies are, because it's just so hard to
Mm,
see.
yeah.
You're that's a fortunate thing. What did
Yeah.
you teach? You taught after grad school?
I did, yeah, and it was at NYU. They let you teach while you're in grad school, or at least they did in 2010. I'm not sure how it works now, but I was just teaching intro to painting classes, some intermediate classes, intro to drawing, and that lasted for about 10 years, and it was all to non-art majors as well. So it was very um, it was a very pleasant experience, because that's the other thing, being, working on your own. I'm an idiot. I don't have much to offer in a lot of different other, in every other arena in this world. It's like, I don't know how much I have to offer, but I do know how to make an intro to painting students painting better, or at least I have a lot of information to offer up to them. And I've painted in a lot of different styles as well, and I worked in illustration for a number of years. So I can kind of point you in a lot of different directions depending on what you want to do. So, it's just nice also to be like, oh, I have information that other people want, and it's helpful for them. And that's a nice feeling to have for 3 hours or 6 hours every week, depending on how many classes you're teaching. So I just found it very pleasurable.
You're not teaching anymore.
No. I guess during the pandemic, I stopped teaching and then didn't go back to it.
So you're just painting full time now?
Yeah, painting full time now. I'll take some commissions every once in a while,
Mhm.
or an illustration project. But yeah, I've been lucky for the last 4 or 5 years where I've just been working on my own practice, which has been, yeah, really nice.
Yeah, a real gift.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, teaching it requires a lot of energy, especially for an introvert like me. I mean, I'm just, flat out on my back for the rest of that day trying to recover from, the 17 different students and interacting with them. And so it took a lot of energy out of me.
So I saw your show, your last show at Magenta Plains. This was
Hmm.
maybe 2023, is that right?
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful show. It really stuck with me. There's a lot of, I think it's worth asking you about where the imagery is coming from, if there's any sort of narrative element.
Yeah, I mean, so that show was my second one at Magenta Plains, and the first show that I had there 2 years before was really limiting in terms of the subject matter. Before that, my shows were expansive, I guess is the best way to put it. Or, my the first solo show that I had in 2015 at Thierry Goldberg. The paintings were all over the place. It was like, Daffy Duck alongside a Da Vinci drawing. There was a text-based painting. There were some of these paintings of busts and corsages, or the little flower paintings that I do. I think there was one small camera painting in there, but there was a hard-edged abstraction painting in there, but it was really expansive, and painted in a lot of different styles. So by the time I had that Magenta show, I limited it down to just these camera paintings that I do. And then I think there were mostly flower paintings in that show, various kinds of flowers that looked a little bit more like, wallpaper, or some of these ones that are like a still life of an arranged flowers in a plastic box, which I call these corsage paintings. And then there was one other painting of confetti falling. But it was mostly cameras and flowers. So I had really limited down my subject matter at that point. And then by the time we get to that next show at Magenta, I introduced a few other things in there as well too. There were some paintings of shells and paintings of geodes as well. So a few more organic objects that had entered in there. Um, um, so it's one of these things where, it should just be top of mind. Like it shouldn't. It's taken me to right now to realize what has happened over the last 10 years of shows for myself. And that first show at Magenta was really dominated by these camera paintings, which for me they're very mechanical. They're obviously man-made objects, and they are dominating you in the space, and they're leading you around the space. And then kind of under observation are these organic objects, flowers in that case. But the cameras and the mechanical objects were dominating that show, where the show that you saw, it had intentionally gone to half and half, where for every camera painting I made, there was an organic object that sat across from it. And there was a kind of feedback loop between those two subjects, where they were mostly taking on each other's kind of color spectrum that they were in. Then the last show that I had, which was up in September in London with a gallery called Union Pacific, the organic objects had taken over in terms of the weight of the show. There were only, I believe, 2 camera paintings in that show. So the organic objects had really outweighed it. And I didn't, when I look back on it, it's a sequence. It was a slow change for that to happen over a 6-year period. But there was no intention in my studio practice to be like, I'm going to start painting less cameras and more organic objects. It just kind of slowly, organically happened over time. So your question of how do I pick out the subjects, there is some structure to it, but I'm trying to leave enough space in there for discovery as well too. And that is also kind of the themes within the painting, trying to create some sort of balance there, where there's a routine, but there's enough space in there for some sort of innovation as well too. But too much innovation becomes a problem of falling out of the routine. So now as I'm making work again, I can kind of feel myself now that I've pinpointed this thread in the work of like, oh, I'm now making more kind of mechanical paintings to force things back into this structure again. And I have been aware of more that I kind of make dichotomies for myself in each show. And even from very early on, even from undergrad, even if I wasn't consciously thinking about it, I can look back at that work and see myself creating a dichotomy. And basically it's because I am not smart enough to keep more than 2 things in my head at the same time. By the time you introduce a third thing, I start getting flustered and overwhelmed and can't keep track of everything. So the first thing I need to do most of the time is just to set up the stage for things to happen. And on the stage needs to be 2 things. And then from there, from this kind of false dichotomy I've set up for myself, then we can start getting into the nuance of things. So from early on, I can look back at the earliest work and kind of see myself interested in this nature versus nurture sort of dichotomy that I was setting up for myself. And then in these recent shows, I've been kind of talking about it in terms of organic objects, man-made objects. I talk about it in terms of left brain, right brain, hemispheres, and them speaking with each other. So I've set up all these different metaphors, but it's usually some sort of dichotomy that then, the other subject matter can further be explored within that.
Are there a lot of art historical references in your paintings?
Yes, yeah. Especially, I mean, the camera paintings, no, those are pretty straightforward. And they have like a monochrome background or a fade. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of indication of light coming into the room, but it's normally like this camera is sitting in a studio space or something like that, where a lot of the objects I start inserting art historical references in there. And they're from all over the canon.
I noticed a Thomas Moran in one of the balloon paintings.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, I'm also horrible with names. So I'm like, oh, here's a painter that I think about all the time and I love their work. And the only way that I'm going to remember this is if I put it in a painting and put the title in there. And then within conversation, I'm embarrassed enough times because I've forgotten who Thomas Moran's name is that I'll somehow remember Thomas Moran is who I am referencing in this. So, it, that's one of the reasons that I end up putting these things in there, just so I can hopefully remember these names myself. I can't keep track of it. But that being said, when I am putting some of those references in there, I think for me, it's just this experience of walking into the Met or one of these giant museums and just being overwhelmed by the amount of information that you come across in there, and styles and different ways of thinking, and this idea of having to somehow narrow down that information in order for it to be digestible. Yeah, there's a lot of different references from all over the place in the paintings. But a lot of the time when people are asking, especially when someone wants to write a press release or I'm being interviewed or something like that, they're kind of like, tell me about your relationship with Thomas Moran. And I'm kind of like, it's not about that for me. It's kind of about just pointing towards using a subject, which is these Thomas Moran paintings, is just this epic nature, and anyone's relationship to seeing that image, not some art historian's reference to that image and going back to when Thomas Moran was making these paintings and what it meant culturally at the time. It's just, no, anyone can understand nature painting, rainbow, many associations different cultures have with these with this imagery, but not anything specific to that artist for the most part. So then I'll use a lot of these other paintings, which just kind of show turmoil in the background. It's people fighting each other, love triangles, whatever, kind of human interactions that are happening behind these more stationary organic objects. But it's not important that we go into the history of those things for me.
When you started doing the flower paintings with the cameras, was it the quality of the objects that attracted you? Like as a painter, were you looking at these things and thinking, I've got to paint that, it's so beautiful, or was there another sort of influence besides that?
Um, let's see. The best way to talk about this is like I can only follow my thinking if I track it all the way back, if that makes sense. So, when I was talking about these paintings that I was making in undergrad, it's it's the kind of typical thing that a 17-year-old would be doing, is just figuring out who they are and what the world is and how they fit into everything. And I grew up with not a lot of art around me. I mean, my dad was an architect and he's British and he loves David Hockney, and we had David Hockney books around. But for the most part, like, I was growing up with Ren and Stimpy and MTV and that kind of culture. That was culture for me. So my paintings were just these insane paintings of cartoon characters, cutting each other to pieces and having sex each other with Burberry print behind them, and all these celebrities mixed in with it, and fast food. It was just this mix of all the nonsense that one encounters.
It was the culture that you absorbed coming up.
Yes, exactly. And as one friend put it, who's a critic now, he said that when you've been fucked over by culture, at some point you want to fuck it back, and that's the paintings that I was making at that time. But during all of that, then I had this. I began to have this interest of just like, why these celebrities? Why is everyone obsessed with them? Why am I obsessed with them? Why do I model myself after them? And then, I had the not very unique insight of like looking at Us Weeklies and the press around these celebrities. And I'm like, oh, they're like, Greek and Roman gods in a way. We raise them up and then we have to tear them down, and then we push them into certain kind of archetypal narratives. And it's just this kind of like recasting of these ancient stories that we're putting these people in. And that became interesting to me. And then from there, I made this jump into, okay, where let's look at these values and where they came from. And of course, goes back to Judeo-Christian kind of morality in our culture. And I read this book by the sociologist named Robert Bellah called The History of Religion. And in this book, he kind of, it's very academic. So he's going over specific religions and how they developed out of this other religion. But one of the subtopics in there is he became interested in the activity of play and how that is fundamental to the development of religions. And then how basically it's the play begets ritual, ritual begets religion, religion begets culture and governments and rules and morality and all those things. But it starts with this kind of area of play where things don't have consequences, where you can toy around with ideas. So I think one of the examples is like, if you're a mammal, like a wolf or something like that, for young wolves, there's this area where the siblings will kind of play with each other, bite each other's necks, wrestle around. But at some point in their lives, you need to actually get good at biting something's neck in order to hunt and survive. And then it becomes very real after that. And that also happens for humans as well, too, in a much more complex way. But that you're trying things around for a long time. And then you're like, oh, well, this technique works. Let's ritualize it. And then after that becoming ritual, then it develops into more systematic thinking, religion, and then implementing it into government and things like that. And then for us, of course, it's like we can bring things back into the arena of play to try to fine tune them. And of course, that's largely art's place in culture for me, is that we are able to work outside of these systems where we can toy around with ideas and they don't have to function anywhere. We can just be teasing them out. Anyways, this is a very long-winded way of getting around to why I pick out these objects. After that kind of thought process, I end up picking objects that mean things in different circumstances and in different cultures, but they have developed into some sort of symbol. So flowers are a very easy one, of course. They are, in different cultures, they're symbolic of different things, but they're a way of like the corsages that I paint is, you're going to a dance, you have a date, the flowers mean romance. This is an indication of romance, why you're using the flowers this way. But another culture could also use those, in a funeral ceremony or something like that. So it's important for me that I'm picking out a subject like that, where even for myself, when I'm painting these little flower corsages, I walk into the studio, especially the first times, because I'd never painted flowers before. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, you used to paint violent fornication and now you're painting flowers. What is that all about? This is too sweet, too romantic. But then I'll walk into the studio the next day and be like, oh, they're these flowers in this little plastic box that look like a casket. That's terribly sad. And, they've been cut off from their ecosystem and environment. And, so I'm kind of flickering back and forth between this place of meaning of what those flowers mean to me personally, and then hopefully what they mean to the viewer as well, too. So the same thing can be said about some of these geode paintings that I make as well, too. There's one way of reading them. If you find yourself in like a crystal store and someone has attached, wisdom to this specific rock, there's that way of thinking about it. Or if you're a geologist, you'll tell a very different story about that same object. But they are these objects that people are drawn to that we then end up telling different stories around. Um, so that's kind of the processing that things go through before I decide, like, oh, that seems to fit within the little world that I've made for myself. Yeah.
So it sounds like these objects are extremely open in terms of meaning.
Yes. Yeah. Very, yeah, very. I mean, they become less and less open, the more that they're in front of me. And then for some people that, there's nothing open about them. They only are going to think about them one way. But I am trying to pick objects that, yes, will remain relatively open, or at least kind of everyone knows as a symbol in one way or another. Flowers indicate something. This polished geode indicates something. The rainbow indicates something. And then you kind of fall into this. What I hope happens is you fall into this place of like, you come to it with a certain interpretation of the object, and it makes you maybe consider different ways of thinking about it. Um,
I
yeah,
think
if
there's a
that makes sense.
level, absolutely, it does. And there's a level of accessibility in your work that I really appreciate. It seems that many different people could look at your paintings and get a lot of different things on many different levels. And our historian can look at it and say, "Oh, there's a Thomas Moran reference here, and then this is happening here. You have this. And then somebody that is art world naive could look at it and just say, "Oh, I like the color. I like flowers." And then somebody else could say, "Oh, this particular flower arrangement means this."
Yeah,
But I like how open it is to all these different ways of looking at it.
yeah. Thank you for saying that. I mean, that is one of these things that wasn't by design. It wasn't like a note that I wrote down for myself, but looking back, it's very easy to see how that happened. Just because I came I came to New York and to NYU with the intention of going to the film school. And I had a lot of friends that remained in the film school. And when I found myself in the art program, I loved it because it was filled with a bunch of weirdos, and I felt at home there. But um, I always had a little bit of pushback in towards the more kind of convoluted conceptual edge, that, especially at that time, the everyone was pushing for and was in vogue within the art world as well too, which I was totally intrigued by. But I also didn't love that, when I brought the smartest friend that I knew to the museum or to this gallery show with me, they would just kind of be like, what is this? And it pushed you away a little bit, which I don't mind. I think that that's important there. We, especially in our moment right now, there should be more art that pushes people away and is not so easily accessible. But coming at that time, I could see myself being like, oh no, I want to find a way to invite more people into these ideas that I find very, very interesting, but seem to push a lot of people away. They're not going to be interested in having this conversation if this is the starting part of the conversation. But if I put Tom Cruise within the exhibition, that'll get everyone talking. That'll get everyone. And yeah, and it's funny talking about this because that was always in the classes that I was teaching. We were talking about early getting the kids to kind of open up and be comfortable, giving constructive criticism. And what one of the projects that early on was the portrait project, and it was also the grid project, but I would make everyone pick a celebrity, or not a celebrity, a well-known figure in the public eye. And um, what it would do is open up the conversation, because everyone had an opinion about Tom Cruise. I mean, it wasn't Tom Cruise because that's another generation. For the younger kids, it was other people, but it would get the room of people arguing about something, or not even arguing, just sharing their different viewpoints on this person's songs or acting career or whatever. it happened to be. And then through that kind of conversation of like, oh, it's okay that I hate Tom Cruise and this person likes Tom Cruise, they were able to engage into this constructive criticism about the artwork as well too, and
It was
then
an
other
entryway.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an entryway. And yeah, I felt like early on that I was kind of trying to do that with my artwork as well too. And then, you know, that's just been, it's been in my thought process for so long that I think that not by design that I have ended up making these paintings that when, you know, my mom and her friends come to the art show, they can also appreciate on some level as well too.
That's good.
But I also hope that there's enough edge to even like the flower paintings where at first you're like, oh my, that's so pretty, but then you're kind of like, wait a second, what is happening here? And it makes you deal with a more complicated space.
Yeah.
um,
I recall your Brad Pitt painting.
oh yes.
Yeah. Seeing that there was a little thing about it in art forum some years ago, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Alex Jovanovic wrote a little piece about it, and that was a wax mannequin of Brad Pitt, and it like a bad wax mannequin. So it was like this kind of, I think it was like in a Russian, you know, Madame Tussauds or their version of it. And he looked like a little more simian or something. So it's Brad Pitt, but like a little bit off. Yeah,
That's that's really good. That's
yeah.
really
But
good.
I mean, even with stuff like that, though, it's just like, you know, I mean, the first painting that did that was Tom Cruise and his nose. And everyone has their opinion on Tom Cruise. But then I made this painting and everyone's like, wow, his nose is very strange, actually. And, you know, I liked that. And so I made this mannequin painting of a mannequin of Brad Pitt. Um, and, you know, I see that same tactic I'm still drawn to even when I'm painting. You were referencing the Thomas Moran rainbow painting. But so it's Thomas Moran's painting in the background, but in the foreground, it's a painting of like a birthday balloon, a very shiny, you know, contemporary balloon that you could buy from the 99-cent store sort of thing that's in front of the Thomas Moran painting. And at first it's just like, you know, everyone loves a rainbow, a shiny rainbow, happy balloon or whatever. But, you know, eventually for most viewers, when they're looking at it, it becomes, the subject matter becomes a little bit more sad because it's just then this symbol of this magnificent nature. And Thomas Moran is known for making, you know, images of the sublime sort of thing. And then it's this, you know, symbol of the sublime that we've reduced down to a point to where you don't have a big reaction to it. It's a very throwaway sort of object. It's plastic. It's destroying the earth, the thing that we're supposed to be celebrating with the thing. So I can still see myself drawn to that kind of urge of bringing people in a certain way, and then you know, that turning against them.
So there's a bit of a sinister quality there behind the confectionery appearance at first.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Um, yeah, I think that's probably, and I could talk about almost all the paintings that way as well. But that's also kind of the person that I am. I'm just like, I'm so neurotic that you couldn't get me to give you a yes or a no on anything. I'm always kind of like, well, maybe on one hand this way, on one hand that way. So it ends up being in the paintings as well.
I think that shows that you actually consider these things. You're considering all these elements of painting and all these elements of what meaning, all these elements of perception and so on.
Yeah.
Just on a material level, how can you describe the process of making a painting?
Yeah, it jumps around as well, but so for those corsage paintings, I'm taking the photograph myself. I'm buying the flowers and arranging them and setting them up, and then but then I'll put them in like Photoshop after that and kind of change around the colors in there as well. and then like the camera paintings that I make, though that imagery is mostly found online, and then I'm taking it into Photoshop and messing around with it, and getting it to a point where I'm ready to paint. And it's at that point it doesn't change too much from what I've mocked up, but it will change a little bit. And then once it's at a scale, I'll change other things around in there. Yeah, so some things are found imagery, and then some things that I'm photographing myself. Sometimes some of these geodes I will buy if I find them in a shop and photograph them, and other times I'll just pull them offline as well too. And At this point, that's kind of by design. I don't want anything to, I want everything to feel like you can't quite place where it is. You know, it doesn't, it doesn't feel like AI. It doesn't feel like Photoshop. It doesn't quite feel like I've set it up in a photo studio. It's in a little bit of an in-between space. So yeah, so I'll mock it up that way, and then I grid most things out, and will start with a pretty detailed underpainting and build it up from there.
In oil.
In oil, yeah. Um, yeah, the underpainting is in acrylic a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time, and I'll do that just because, especially with like the cameras, I'll be able to make color choices much more quickly that way. You know, it's kind of like there's the mock-up, and then once it gets up there, it's just these subtle little shifts. And as you know, in oil, it's just, you know, I don't want to wait 2 days to do that. Like, you know,
Or
I'm gonna put
longer,
on
depending on the
now.
pigment, right?
Yeah, exactly. It could take even longer. So and I want to be making that decision pretty quickly.
So
When
most of the
I'm
underpainting is done in acrylic then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll get it pretty, and then it pretty much looks almost finished at that point, and then the layer of oil comes in to smooth everything out.
So then you're getting into the fine detail and the blending and the feathering and the sort of getting things to the level of
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
have. Yeah.
just tightening them out and smoothing them, and yeah, I mean, it's almost annoying to me because sometimes people come in and see the acrylic painting and they're like, "Oh, it's finished," and I'm like, "What? It's halfway through at this point."
The underpainting is pretty detailed then.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's pretty detailed. I mean, yeah, I mentioned my dad being an architect. I definitely have, especially with the camera paintings, my ruler and stencils and everything out, and it looks like an engineering drawing. That's the first stage, is drawing it out up
From a
there with the
grid,
grid.
from the photo you've composed, then you'll
Hmm.
print that out, make a grid on that, and then transfer that to the canvas
Yes, yeah,
via
yeah.
the grid.
Yeah, via the grid. And I
Yeah.
stick with the grid. I've never projected anything, one, just because I never had a projector, but I think I got into, um, you know, just being able to nudge things around a little bit within there to give it a little bit of a surreal quality. So I like working with the grid from the beginning stage.
How much does it deviate from the original composition?
Um, it would be slight. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a few times where, I mean, you know, I always talk about this with other artists as well too. Is like I should have a projector, even if I stick with the grid system. So much of like picking out the scale of something is important for me, and if you have the projector, then you can just see what it is going to be at that size before you know, decide to spend a day stretching and gessoing this canvas for it. So I should have the projector just to do it, but I don't. So sometimes when things are actually at scale in front of me, I will make some changes, but it's still at the early on process at that point.
Basically one layer of oil paint then?
Two normally. Yeah, I mean, it's probably 2 layers of acrylic and then 2 layers of oil, for the camera paintings and most other things as well too. Um, yeah. And then recently I've been introducing some kind of the backgrounds of, especially behind some of the organic objects there, will remain in acrylic, and I'll sand them down to give them a little bit of a different texture. And sometimes now they're a little bit more brushy. So I give myself some freedom to kind of go in there and pretend that I have the chops to be a more loose painter. But that gives me some ground for experimentation to happen in those little zones.
I've talked to, quite a few painters, quote, realist painters who are sort of envious of people that paint more gesturally and in a more free, like, quote, free or abstract way. And I kind of
Yeah.
can see that, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's all the painters that I love are much looser than I am. uh,
What painters have influenced you, both contemporary and historical?
I guess that because I'm so tight, like, any like Aang or something like that is just like I'm drooling over and I'm humbled by, because it's just like I'm never going to get that quality. I don't have the time, I'm not good enough, it's just not going to happen. But I'm shooting for the stars. So that's always in my head. And then being in California, Robert Bechtel, the photorealist, was, in the San Francisco airport. They have one of his paintings in one of the terminals. So, I'm passing that all the time. And then Richard Estes. And, when I was younger, I loved, I just found the rendering so impressive in painters like that, and I've always admired it. So that's on one side of it. And but like you were saying, though, I find myself, like, for contemporary painters, much more drawn to people that are much more brushy than I am. And I think it's just because I the magic is alive in those ones a little bit more, because it's not my process. So I can get involved with the romantic side of it more than I can looking at another tight painter, where I just fall into the technical parts of the painting when I'm looking at it. But I really just, I'm affected by the people that are around me. I can admire going to the museum and everything, but the people that really filter into my thinking have always been the people that have been around me. So it's the teachers that have been around me. And at NYU, Maureen Galais was a teacher there, both undergrad and grad school. And she had an effect on me and a lot of the other students that were there at the time as well. And I love her
Yeah,
paintings.
me
Yeah,
too. It's pure poetry.
no, pure poetry. And I think that it's one of these things that I never consciously thought about. But I got here in 2001, and Marine was around, and I was totally taken in by them. That I can see a lot of the time. For people that don't know, Marine is most well known for painting these solitary little houses within a landscape. And at first, they're unassuming, but the more you look at them, there's a certain mystery to them, and the viewer can kind of project all sorts of different things onto them. At some point, you might start noticing, like, oh, they don't have a lot of doors and windows to them. What exactly is this structure? And I, now looking back, can see, oh, I'm also making isolated objects that different interpretations can be projected onto. And I never made the direct comparison with Marine, but I can certainly see her influence on the work there. Um, and then I also had Keith Mayerson, who is a painter that shows at Karma now. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. Um,
Does he have a show up right now?
I don't know. No, not a show up right now. I forget when his last show at Karma was, but his subject matter really jumps around and is based in pop culture as well too. Um, but it's kind of this, like, pushing outwards to as many different subject matters as you can possibly get to. And I can see that influence on my work as well too. Because for the longest time, I was pushing in as many different directions as I could. So yeah, I mean, those are two big people that have had an influence on me, just because they were around during schooling and are still in my life in one way or another. Um,
That's a great point. I think we take it for granted the people that were around that are the real influences. We think, oh, I love this painter. I love Gerhard Richter. I love I like this and this and this. And I love
yeah.
Van Eyck and these people. But actually, it's the people that you've directly come into contact with that I think are the most influential without your even realizing it.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's just so much how. I mean, I guess that's why I'm like, I'm not getting down on myself here, but I'm always like, I'm not that smart, or I'm never as smart as I think that I am. Even when I'm in grad school and I wrote this 40-page dissertation and I'm talking about all these high-minded things all the time, um, there's a subconscious level of thinking that is as influential, if not more influential, that's happening all the time. And I have realized over the years that I how much of a role it plays. So like I had a studio visit one time where someone it's kind of after grad school and they're like, why are you painting this bust? Why this bust of Hercules? Why do you use this red and blue light to be cast over them in this painting and many other paintings? And I'm going through my contrived answer of everything. And then I'm leaving the studio that night, and I was in the financial district at that time, and I turned off the lights, and it was a very cool light inside, and then a very red light was coming through out the window, and then on the side of the building that I'm across from are these busts on the side of the building that I'd always looked at and everything. But I'm just like, oh my God, I spent like 30 minutes telling this person why the reasoning behind why I use these things, but I see it every single day, and it filtered in somehow. So I try to be aware of that now, where it's just like, it's really, you're digesting so many different things, and you can put something in front of you and go like, I think this person is brilliant. I think this idea is brilliant. I want to somehow get that into my work. But the best way to do that is just to subtly add it into the routine every single day. And that's how it, for me at least, ends up being there and being more permanent, and maybe even having like a deeper understanding of that thing that you're after, rather than just trying to kind of poach it or spend a small period of time reading a book about the subject or something like that. If that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I push back a little on your comment that you're not intelligent because I think like there's so many different kinds of intelligence,
Yeah.
and you have an extremely high painting intelligence. You know what I mean? I think we've locked down intelligence to mean only your like retention for a certain kind of learning, but
Right.
so many different kinds of, and I think it comes down to specificity, right? From an art standpoint, it has to do with how how specific you can go into your own interests, perhaps,
Yeah.
how deep you can go.
It's funny when you hear like you watch an athlete do something totally spectacular, or even a dancer as well too. Like I love going to the ballet, but then you ask them afterwards, like the person, you're in tears, you're like, oh my God, such beauty in front of me, how did this happen? And they're just like, I don't know, I just kind of locked in and I did a lot of training and I stuck to my routine, and it's just kind of my day today. And you're just like, they have the most inarticulate thing to say
Yeah,
about this complex, beautiful thing that's happened in front of you. And of course, that happens for artists all the time
all
as
the
well,
time.
too.
If you could describe it in words, you wouldn't need to paint it, right?
You would not need to paint it. And I mean, some, there's so many different kinds of artists, and some that are absolutely brilliant and some of the smartest people that I know. Um, and then there's other people where it's just like, no, you shouldn't think about this too much. Just do it. Don't try to talk about it. Don't try to explain it to anyone. And it's hard knowing, what that's going to be for you, and finding what your path is. But I think that I always remember this. I'm going to forget the critic's name, that said this, but it was at Lisa Yuskavich, the painter that chose at Zwarner, was at grad school, I think, with this critic that had decided to stop being a writer and become a painter. And they're really good friends. And he, said something along the lines of like, he overthinks everything and it cripples you when you know too much about painting. Then every single movement, every single decision is loaded in some way. But if you are working from a more instinctual place, you're going to get somewhere different. And I think that when I was talking about this guy Robert Bella and the history of religion, and him talking about this arena of play that is important for development, it's being able to enter into this place where you let go of all the things that you know or think you know, and reinterpret them in there. And if you're not able to do that kind of play, you're not going to innovate in any way or come up with anything interesting to say. You're just doing a research project at that point. So it is letting yourself be, I guess, not stupid, but in a kind of more playful
Maybe
arena.
free, more
Yeah,
free.
free.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I've noticed that often when I start a body work or something new, it starts with an idea that I consider to be dumb. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's stupid. I can't do. And then that's kind of the point where you really should watch it, because if it's something that seems utterly absurd or silly or just no, I couldn't, and then but you keep coming back to it, you have to really pay attention to that, I think.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Your mind is onto something there. Um, I mean, and that I realized that at some point that I was never going. I was. It's always been about some sort of discovery for me. This process, like it's alarming to me that I can spend as much time as I do painting, and also think about myself as like an 80-year-old and be like, yeah, I'll probably still like to do that. It's just crazy to spend that much time on something and not be driven crazy by it, or be exhausted by it, or just get bored by the entire thing. But it's always been, I'm addicted to this discovery part of the whole thing. And my paintings are very routine, and I have my little process and everything, and structure. But on a personal level, they're always revealing something from my subconscious that I was not able to get at just sitting around thinking about what's going on with myself, or even sitting down and writing. Something gets revealed through this process. And I'm addicted to that still, even after all these years.
I'm sure
And
it's the
I'm never.
discovery, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
that sense of discovery, and that there's something unknown, and it's going to be exciting and illuminating when you come across it again. Even if it doesn't happen quite as frequently as it used to happen, it still does happen. But every time that I have approached my work from a different angle of, especially when you're in school, or even when I was in New York in that kind of early 2000s times, when things were more conceptual, and I was like, oh, I should approach it from these smart angles. Like I like this philosopher and I like this thinker. Why not make an art project from those ideas? It never led anywhere. I never made anything that I thought was of interest, or it didn't seem to interest other people. It didn't interest myself. And I just found that as much as I wanted to be that kind of very smart conceptual artist, like it's this discovery part of all of this that remains, that I'm addicted to, and it's kind of the only place that I have been able to make both work that's interesting to me and seemingly to some other people at least.
I think you have to be honest.
Yeah.
in that
I mean,
way.
it's so humbling, right? I mean, that's what like being an artist for me is so embarrassing. The whole process is just embarrassing because you're putting yourself in that state of play all the time. You know, you're coming up with things that are just not going to work over and over and over again. Um, and yeah, it's humbling to go through that process constantly, but also ultimately very rewarding as well.
It reminds me of something that Dan Behar or Bejar, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the frontman for Destroyer and the New Pornographers. You
Oh
know those
yeah.
bands. He said that he was really embarrassed to be like an aging musician, yeah, an aging rock star. He was, you know,
Oh,
I think
totally.
we're fortunate as visual artists that they're really. I mean, there isn't for any sort of art. That's just a construct in the culture of
Yeah,
youth and so on. But I think, especially as visual artists, there's no pressure. There's no shelf life. You can always. I mean, it's great having
yeah,
friends that are older in their 80s and 70s,
yeah.
80s. Even I had a friend that I met at a residency who was in her 90s still
Wow.
painting.
Yeah, yeah. I love seeing that, and I love that about the art world as well too. That it kind of invites those intergenerational relationships as well too, because it doesn't matter who you're talking to, the 20-year-old or the 80-year-old, you're both obsessed with this process in a way and can fall into that conversation very easily with them. But there is this like, yeah, I mean, for artists, like normally we don't get good until we're in our 60s, 70s. I mean, that's when a lot of the people are making their best work. It's not always true, but a lot of the time it is true.
It
Um,
takes a lifetime.
yeah, it takes a lifetime, and it does speak to this kind of like deeper wisdom um, that I don't know how to describe, to tell you the truth. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you describe it in your work. You articulate it
yeah,
through your work.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully, yeah. Um, and that happens in some people's work, but then, there's the bravado of a 20-year-old as well too, is can be fun and addicting and exciting as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Um,
it can. I remember. I mean, back in those days, in your 20s and 30s, you were invincible, right? As an artist, you could do anything, and you could, there was no. Yeah, I think it's good to have a some temperament, to have your practice, to have a more stable practice. But I guess everybody's different, though. That's the beauty of it.
yeah, yeah, and I just love that it comes out in the work as well too. I mean, there's some painters where, it's coming out of a very chaotic place. And it's brilliant work because of that. And then there's other people that are just, you can tell that they're just such a measured person, and it can be seen in their work as well too. And then there's other people where it just totally surprises you. You're like, I had no idea that that's the kind of work that you would be making, that your energy would manifest in this way, that it doesn't, the artist and the art does not match up at all.
Like a counterbalance to their personality.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that can happen as well too. Yeah.
Well, Chasen, it's been awesome talking. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I know on your podcast you talk about meditation as well too, and I may have missed this, you talking about it on another episode, but I'm curious if you can see, what, I don't know when you started meditating, but if you can see that influence in your studio practice at all at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think I'm more patient. I started meditating back in 2017 after a 10-day silent retreat in the
Hmm.
Goenka. Have you done any of those? Are you a meditator?
I'm a meditator, but I
Ah,
have not gone on any retreats. No.
I highly recommend one of those if you get the chance. And
Yeah.
10 days seems like a long time, but it goes by fast. And for example, we can hardly remember what we did the last 10 days, but it
Yeah.
really does have I think an outsized impact of just everything in your life.
Hmm.
Meditate even for a short amount of time, and it's proportional to however much meditation you're doing. If you're doing 30, 40 minutes a day, twice a day, an hour twice a day, you're gonna be a lot more peaceful. Even a
Yeah.
bit helps a lot, but just in terms of slowing down, I think it slowed me down a lot in the studio, and
Yeah.
it's made me try and look at things as being non-hierarchical. Like you get to the studio and we all have stuff we prefer doing, you have
Hmm.
those preferences become less pronounced.
Yeah.
So like everything, so I'm stretching the canvas, I'm sanding the panel, I'm making the paint, like I'm mixing the paint, whatever it is, all those elements, I think I'm less particular about. Like it used to be, oh, I don't want to do this. I guess I'll just do this stuff. And then I want to get to the fun part, that's painting. But so it sort of
Right.
flattens everything out in a good way. And
Oh,
that's the whole
totally.
idea behind this kind of meditation. This what's taught at the SN Goenka retreats.
Hmm.
These Vipassana meditations. Vipassana just means insight, to see things as they
Yeah.
are, which is the basic idea of it is that you're moving away from craving and aversion.
Hmm.
Just really there. You're just observing things as they are. That's really
Yes.
the critical part of it. That's our biological imperative, is to move away from pain and towards pleasure. But there's a
Yeah.
space where often there's nothing you can do. You're just there in that moment. So if you can observe it, the vehicle for this meditation is observing sensations in the body. Yeah, the first 3 days are just observing the breath coming in and out, and then the next 7 days are observing sensations on the body. And
Hmm.
in these sessions, you're basically looking, like if you have an itch or if you have a sensation of heat, of pain or something, you can just
Hmm.
observe that. Like you're sitting there for a while. It's like an hour, no more than an hour at
Yeah.
a time, but then you might have a backache because you're sitting there for a pretty long stretch. You're not moving as
Right.
much. And then you get to the point you're scanning your body. You can just observe that point in your body that is painful. And instead of reacting, you're just observing, which is incredibly useful. If you get the opportunity, it's just such a beautiful, so invaluable, I would say, doing one of these retreats, and they're free.
Hmm.
They feed you. You can donate to whatever afterwards. You can't give anything right away because the idea is that you live with the 8 precepts of a monk in the Buddhist
Yeah.
tradition.
I see.
I would highly recommend it. But what kind of meditation do you do now?
Just focusing on the breath, and I'm only doing it for 10 or 15 minutes every day, but at this point, I've been doing it for almost 10 years.
That's great.
Um, yeah, so I need to mix it up a little bit. And I have a lot of friends that have also done retreats as well too, and are more seriously intertwined with their practice. So I hear about it and talk about it a lot, but I have never set aside the time
Oh, just do it,
to do
man.
it
Yeah, do
myself.
it. Do it.
Yeah,
It's transformative. Maybe before you do one of these things, you would just get upset if somebody cuts you off in traffic 10 every time.
right.
And now maybe 9 out of 10 times you still get upset, but maybe that one time you don't. It's just
Right.
like you get a little lighter. It's like you
Yeah, and that's completely worth it
oh, it's
as
totally
well
worth it.
too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
priceless. It truly is. It changes the consciousness.
I mean, for me, over this 10-year period of time, I mean, it has kind of slowed me down in a way and made me. I mean, I was talking about earlier in this podcast and getting down on myself about, being an idiot or not that smart or totally neurotic or whatever. And I think that's just me speaking from this place of like, oh, now when I'm coming up with, I mean, I'm talking about this in art, it's much more valuable in life when you're dealing with other people and you're not so reactive with them. But in terms of like a studio practice, not following this kind of like neurotic chatter of like, oh, I have to explain this right away, or I just finished a painting, I need to start another painting, I better just start into it very quickly. That kind of letting things rise from a quieter space, and it's been valuable to kind of know what is neurotic chatter and what has risen from a place that isn't me just trying to, defend my ego or try to look cool or smart or whatever, is kind of a genuine interest that my subconscious might be dealing with that I can't even put words to yet. But if I give it the space to rise up, then I'll be able to flesh it out a little bit more or understand it. And the practice of painting, especially when a painting will take a month or 3 weeks or whatever it is a lot of the time picking a subject matter is kind of a way of being like, oh, I want to focus on this vague feeling of conflicting ideas that I can't quite suss out at this point. But if happens over the next 3 weeks, it will start to get fleshed out in a way, but it's not going to happen in a quick way. It's going to happen in a very slow way. And that, picking certain, for me, I repeat a lot of subject matters as well too. And that's kind of with this idea of like, this is going to be something that I'm never going to totally wrap my head around. So this might just be a place of contemplation that I've returned to, making this corsage painting for the 30th time throughout my entire life. And yeah, I mean, it was hard to get to a slower place in life to allow myself to do that rather than just paint the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, get excited by the new idea, or, the new thing that I thought was in vogue or whatever. So yeah, that's been,
So
I can see
it's helped you
that.
slow it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
And, and it took 10 years for me to realize that that was happening.
You can't really measure it
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that way. You know it's happening and you know it's real, but it's not a quantifiable thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And
You'll never see your paintings if you hadn't been meditating. You'll never see what your trajectory would have been like.
yeah, yeah, totally. And I mean, at least I hope I reflect back on it in that way. It's funny in some way, like the work almost seems like the the proof of a certain part of who you are, that, like, you shouldn't trust the narrator sometimes. Like, I can't trust my own interpretation of myself. But maybe I can, through this pattern of making these things for an extended amount of time, at least we can trust in whatever that pattern was.
Right, that you
um,
can trust in that process. That it can't
yeah,
the process doesn't lie. It
yeah,
can't.
yeah, exactly. And it's going to live outside of you, hopefully, as well,
That's
too.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't hide from it. There's something really, I guess, going back to what you were talking about about being slightly embarrassed about it is because I think it's because there's no hiding, right? It's all there
Mhm.
just for everybody
No.
to see.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very clear when it's earlier work or something like that, and you're just like, oh no, that was,
Yeah.
I don't know
That's
how
not
I can
me.
excuse myself
Yeah.
from being a 17-year-old boy
Yeah.
full of testosterone. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
gonna happen.
I've thrown
It's
away so many
happening right
paintings,
now
so many
to
embarrassing
lots of
paintings.
different people.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're valuable for that reason as well too, as markers of that place in your life.
That's right. They got you to the next phase, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're seeing some sort of productive growth here,
Yeah.
uh, you
Yeah.
know, if we start degenerating into 17-year-old boy land again, then maybe I should start
Yeah.
being a little more critical of that.
Yeah. Then you really should go to the retreat. Then you
Yes. Yeah. Then,
really better
then
go.
we know it's time.
Mandatory silent meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yes.
again.
I'm so happy to do this with you.
Thanks again for doing it.
Yeah.